Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhav, Radha Madhav, Radha Madhav, Jaya Radha Madhav. Shalom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtadhar Srimad, His Divine Grace. Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantharashim Bhagavatam Ki Itakor Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Aha. Okay, Hare Krishna, everybody. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, text, Canto 4, chapter 21, text number 45 and 46. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nastapreshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. Text number 45. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nripatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushtuvar Hishta Manasa Sadhuvadena Sadhava. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nripatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushtuvar Hishta Manasa Sadhuvadena Sadhava. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nripatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushtuvar Hista Manasa Sadhuvadena Sadhava. Haribo. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nripatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushtuvar Hista Manasa Sarvadena Sarva. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bhuvanam Nripatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushtuvar Hista Manasa Sarvadena Sarva. Maitreya Uvacha Iti Bruvana Mipatim Pitrideva Dvijataya Tushturushtamanasa Saruvadena Sadhava. Word for word, Maitreya Uvacha. The great sage Maitreya continued to speak. Iti, thus, Bhuvanam, while speaking, Nirpatim, the king, Pitir, the denizens of the Pitriloka, Deva, the demigods, Vijayatayaha, Vijatayaha, sorry, and the twice born, the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas, Tushtuvuhu, satisfied, Kristamanasaha, greatly pacified in mind, Saruvadena, by expressing congratulations, Saravaha, all the saintly persons present. Translation and short purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Maitreya said, after hearing King Prithu speak so nicely, all the demigods, the denizens of the Pitriloka, the Brahmanas, and the saintly persons present at the meeting congratulated him, expressing their goodwill. Please repeat. The great sage Maitreya said, after hearing King Prithu speak so nicely, all the demigods, the denizens of the Pitriloka, the Brahmanas, and the saintly persons present at the meeting congratulated him by expressing their goodwill. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. When a person speaks very nicely at a meeting, he is congratulated by the audience, who express their goodwill with words like sadhu, sadhu. This is called sadhu vada. All saintly persons, pitas, denizens of Pitriloka, and demigods who were present at the meeting and heard Prithu Maharaj express their goodwill with words like sadhu, sadhu. They all accepted the good mission of Prithu Maharaj, and they were fully satisfied. Text number 46. Putrena jayate lokan iti satyavati shruti brahmadanda hata papo yadveno tyataratama tyataratama. Translation. They all declared that the Vedic conclusion that one can conquer the heavenly planets by action of a putra or a son was fulfilled. For the most sinful Vena, who had been killed by the curse of the Brahmanas, was now delivered from the darkest region of hellish life by his son Prithu Maharaj. I'll read it one more time. They all declared that the Vedic conclusion that one can conquer the heavenly planets by the action of a putra or son was fulfilled. For the most sinful Vena, who had been killed by the curse of the Brahmins, was now delivered from the darkest region of hellish life by his son Maharaj Prithu. Purport. According to the Vedic version, there is a hellish planet called Put, and one who delivers a person from there is called Putra. The purpose of marriage, therefore, is to have a Putra, or a son who is able to deliver his father, even if the father falls down to hellish condition of Put. Maharaj Prithu's father, Vena, was a most sinful person, and was therefore cursed to death by the Brahmanas. Now all the great saintly persons, sages and Brahmanas present in the meeting, after hearing from Maharaj Prithu about his great mission in life, became convinced that the statement of the Vedas had been fully proved. The purpose of accepting a wife in religious marriage, as sanctioned in the Vedas, is to have a putra, a son qualified to deliver his father from the darkest region of hellish life. Marriage is not intended for sense gratification, but for getting a son fully qualified to deliver his father. But if a son is raised to become an unqualified demon, how can he deliver his father from hellish life? It is therefore the duty of a father to become a Vaishnava and raise his children to become Vaishnavas. Then, even if by chance the father falls into a hellish life in his next birth, such a son can deliver him, as Maharaj Prithu delivered his father. Yes. But in this case, we have saintly Jamuna. She will deliver her whole family. Om Jnanatamarandhyasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Shagajatam Sagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vishubhana Shuti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vanacharine Prabhupada Vallabhaya Singha Srilavanodine Agyanadvanta Gramanam Pashtacha Patitatmanam Gyana Gurute Achitaharine Chakshashe Nama Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtacha Deshatarane. So here we are seeing the result of association with the Vaishnavas, even for those who are passed away or deceased. So we hear in the Krishna book and in various places throughout Srila Prabhupada's literatures that if someone becomes a Vaishnava in the family, then that entire family is delivered up to 14 generations ahead and behind because of the great power of a Vaishnava. And we understand from reading and hearing these pastimes that King Vena's, or Amarish Prithu's father, King Vena, was a great demon. And he wasn't a normal just demon. He was an intense hater of God who didn't even think about God all the time, like we hear about Kamsa and Hiranyakashipu and Shishupal, who were demons, but they were actually Krishna conscious in the sense that they were always thinking of Krishna. But Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains that Maharaj Vena was not that type of demon. Therefore, he didn't become delivered by his meditation on Krishna. He was fully sinful and psycho. But his son, King Prithu, Maharaj Prithu, was extraordinarily devotional and had all good qualities, and therefore was able to deliver his sinful father by the power of his devotion to Krishna. So there's a few points that are being made in this verse, in these two verses. One of them is the first verse, that when the speaker is speaking, it's customary that the audience respects the speaker and awards them for their nice speaking. So there's a very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most important verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Tadviri pranipatena pariprashnena seva upadekshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattvadarshinaha. That just learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So the relationship between guru and disciple is the most important aspect of our spiritual life. The most important verse, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada, in the Vedic pantheon, the Vedic, work, is Yasya Deve Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tatagara Tasyate Katita Hyarta Prakasanta Mahatmana. That one who has implicit faith in the spiritual master and in the Supreme Lord, to him only are all the imports of Vedic knowledge revealed. So there's a proper way to approach an elevated personality and to inquire about spiritual knowledge. You can't inquire in the wrong way. You have to inquire in the right way. You have to have the right attitude. So much of bhakti is attitude. And so the attitude we have toward those senior devotees that are guiding us is going to seriously affect our spiritual life. And if we have an attitude of humility, surrender, unworthiness, and ultimately, most importantly, service, then those devotees will impart knowledge unto us. Krishna says, Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. That to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And if you read the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada explains that even if one has a spiritual master, even if one is part of a spiritual organization, even if they don't read the books of their spiritual master, if they have a devoted service attitude, then Krishna will give them enlightenment from within the heart. So on the spiritual plane, the service is absolute. Srila Prabhupada is gone, yet we see that these devotees of Srila Prabhupada, they're getting so much mercy from serving Srila Prabhupada. Think of Parameshwar Das, such a blissful devotee, but his intense desire to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, of which he's almost distributed 1 million. Because of that, Srila Prabhupada is pleased and bestowing his blessings. And therefore, there is a relationship there on the spiritual platform. So, in the same way, with all devotees and with Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual master, this attitude of service is extraordinarily important. And the process of Shravanam is considered the very first process of devotional service. How are we hearing? It said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, I only asked my guru one question. How can I serve you? So we see that Srila Prabhupada was exceptionally and extraordinarily advanced because he was devoted to this service attitude toward his spiritual master. And therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta marked him. He said, I have marked him. He likes to what? He likes to hear. So what is it we are hearing? So this respect offered by the members of the assembly who are hearing Maharaj Prithu is very important because it's in this attitude and in this cultivation of a respectful assembly of Vaishnavas that one can receive that knowledge and hear that knowledge properly. So they're acknowledging what he said, sadhu, sadhu, very respectfully and humbly. So that doesn't just apply to as we are, hearing and after the speaker has spoken, that also applies to our inquiries. How is it we're inquiring? If someone's inquiring very challenging, then they will not understand anything. And if someone's inquiring in the wrong way, then they won't be able to comprehend what's being spoken. But if someone's inquiring in a submissive way, then in that case, one will be able to understand very nicely. And I'm thinking of some verses. As I said, actually, I didn't prepare for this class at all. Wasn't told I was giving class until literally 2 minutes before the class started. But what's coming to me is this nice verse from the second chapter of the first canto. We hear about the proper inquiry. Suta Goswami is offering his obeisances to his spiritual master. And then he says, O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and are so of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. So this is the proper way to inquire. Are we inquiring about Krishna? So if we don't develop the service attitude toward the guru, toward the devotees, toward Srila Prabhupada's books, then what we'll only get is material knowledge. The spiritual knowledge won't be transferred. We'll hear, these kind of material facts. But actually the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual enlightenment happens when one develops this service attitude, develops this proper attitude of hearing. And therefore, after hearing properly, one can chant. And what's the proper attitude to chant? Trinata Pisanichena. And one should chant in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, offering all respects unto others, and not expecting any respect for oneself, and being more tolerant than a tree. So it's this attitude that one has in the assembly of hearing that we can actually assimilate spiritual knowledge. So the sages, the Brahmins and Vaishnavas who are hearing Maharaj Prithu speak, they're expressing their gratitude, which is very important to express gratitude, because gratitude is a very powerful emotion, especially the gratitude we have toward the Guru, toward the sages, toward the Shastras, toward the Lord, that we're being able to be in, that we're being engaged in devotional service. Because if we weren't engaged in devotional service, what would we be doing? We would be doing nothing. We would be doing that which is not. We would be in Maya. So we're engaged in devotional service. And Prabhupada says that one of the hardest things to do is to be satisfied. Yet it's required of us to become actual devotees. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasochati Nakangshati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. That the Brahma Bhuta is someone who's actually realized I'm not this body. They're satisfied by dint of their internal pleasure. Sometimes I do an experiment. And I see if I can go from waking up at around 2 o'clock to after 9 o'clock without saying anything to anybody. And a lot of times I do it. And I think, I didn't have any conversation with anybody, but I feel so full because I'm having a conversation with Krishna. You're chanting, you're doing my artik, and all this stuff is going on, but I'm not speaking to anybody. So therefore, silence is one of the qualities of the devotee, because the devotee is experiencing so much internal bliss. And sometimes I meet, with the devotees, we can have these nice conversations about our Krishna consciousness, because silence is a very important aspect of being devotee, gravity and silence. So it's a symptom of material intoxication to always be blabbering our mouths. Vacho vegam. Vacho vegam, manasakrota vegam, jiva vegam, udaparasta vegam, etan vegam yovashaheta dira, sarvamapi mam prativim sashashyat. One who can control the urges of the vacho, the mouth, the speaking propensity. The person who can control that, he's the very first person, the very first qualification for actually making advancement. Vacho vegam, manas sakrota vegam, the mind and anger. The tongue, belly, and genitals. If you can control those 6 urges, you're a master. I was just talking to one boy. He was saying, I want self-mastery. And I said, okay, what's self-mastery? And all these far out ideas. And I said, well, how would you take it back a second? Vacho vegam, manasakrota vegam, jiva vegam, udaparasta vegam. That's self-mastery. Master the 6 urges. So the devotee, he can be silent because he's experiencing bliss within. He's experiencing internal pleasure. Sometimes when we are amongst those who are not experienced in devotional service, they ask us, what's new? And I say, Krishna. He's ever new. No, what's new? No, we've been doing the same thing for years. We wake up, we do Mangal Arti, we chant our japa, we do service, we do Harinam. Wake up, chant our japa, do Mangal Arti. Same thing. What's new? You can't understand, because internally it's like you're seeing the Grand Canyon, ever more internal bliss, becoming more and more revealed to you every day you practice Krishna consciousness. You're seeing so much more inside. And there's so much going on actually for the devotee. There's so much going on if they're actually tuned into their sadhana. What's going on is I'm making progress on the path back to Godhead. I've had realizations. I'm having realizations about Krishna. That is huge. And if you're not having realizations, then your life is not so great. So we have to have realizations about the Lord. And what are those realizations? Where do they come from? They come from seriously practicing this spiritual process. Seriously applying it. And in that way, there's so much going on. We can't describe it to the non-devotees. We can only describe it to the devotees. So when such a person who is having those realizations speaks, they're very much appreciated by the audience, by the hearers, because these realizations are not coming from their mental platform. They're coming from the platform of the heart. They're coming from Krishna himself, because they're factually engaged in devotional service. Therefore, they can explain the Shastras in a unique and powerful way that inspires people. So I am not even prepared at all for this class, but somehow Krishna's given me something to say. Because you're always feeling, what is it that Krishna wants me to say? What is it that I'm getting? So the next verse, all the saintly Brahmanas thus addressed Prithu Maharaj, O best of the warriors. I'm sorry, that's the wrong verse. They all declare that the Vedic conclusion that one can conquer the heavenly planets by the action of a putra or son was fulfilled. So then they're speaking that a son, if one has a son who is a devotee, like we spoke earlier, then all of the sinful actions of that person can be removed, and he can be delivered by the actions of his son, because he brought this wonderful being into the world. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada explains that the real purpose of married life is to have a son, to have a pure devotee child. And we see that example especially in the life of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was himself a pure devotee, and who, by his desire, intense desire to be accompanied by an assistant to help him propagate this Krishna consciousness all over the world, had his child, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, who was born Bimal Prasad. And that Bimal Prasad was such an extraordinary ray of Vishnu. So in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life, one can see the real purpose of sexuality and married life, in that they're bringing powerful devotional children into the world and doing a service to Krishna. So married life serves many purposes for the person aspiring to go back home, back to Godhead. But one of those purposes is not to indulge in sense gratification. It's described by our acharyas that there are 9 types of devotional service, and that is pure devotional service. Besides that, there is nothing else. So marriage and the varnashram, even sannyas and brahmachari life, those are all auxiliaries to pure devotional service. They're not actual spiritual things innately. They're material positions. So why do they exist? Sometimes they're called secondary devotional service, or supportive, because they help support someone in their devotional service. So if someone is married, then that marriage should be a tool by which they can be supported in their devotional service. Why is that? Because the wife is assisting the husband in his devotional service. The husband is assisting the wife in her devotional service. And in that way, they are doing the same thing the brahmacharis are doing. They're dealing with the perverted adi rasa. So in the material world, the adi rasa, or the original love for God that every living entity has, is corrupted by material energy, and therefore it's transformed into lust, material lust. And so both the brahmacharis and the grihastas are dealing with material lust. It's not that the grihastas are on an extraordinarily lower platform. Sometimes the grihastas are more elevated than the brahmacharis, and sometimes the brahmacharis are more elevated than the grihastas in terms of where their consciousness is at. Everybody can look at Vaisheshika Prabhu and see that he's, a higher devotee than almost anybody I've ever seen. I think it was Bhakti True Swami. There's a nice video where, Vaisheshika Prabhu is speaking, and Bhakti True Maharaj raises his hand. He says, for so many years we thought we are leaders, and now we see that you are the real leader of this movement. And Vaisheshika Prabhu is so tuned in, high octane Krishna conscious personality. I mean, there's no one like him. He's just unbelievable devotee. Yet he's a married man. So, also Borijan Prabhu, also a married devotee, but, way elevated soul. So each person in their devotional life is dealing with this adi rasa in the perverted form of lust. And so the brahmacharya ashram is a tool to deal with lust by renunciation and by engaging that energy in the study of the scripture, in the preaching activities of Krishna consciousness, and intense devotional service and devotion to the guru, and in that way transforming that lust into love for all the living entities. And the grihastha ashram is a way of using that lust, dovetailing it to have children and to raise those children and to have a loving relationship with the husband and wife, and in that way experience the fruits of that energy and become detached from it, just like the brahmacharis are also becoming detached from it. But both ashrams are dealing with it in different ways. So both are tools to deal with the same energy. So the married life of the grihastha ashram is not a way to indulge in the perverted reflection of Krishna's love. It's a way to overcome the perverted reflection of Krishna's love via the process of having children. And so in having children, one wants to raise them very nicely so that they can deliver others and deliver the parents. Because it's a devotional service. Krishna says, I am sex life that is not contrary to religious principles. And so the comma is very important there, because some people say, Krishna says, I am sex life. That's not contrary to religious principles. The comma is there. He says, that is not contrary to religious principles. So what does that mean? That means sex life is used to have children, and in that way create good progeny for the world, good population. And that's an act of devotional service. I was in Mayapur, and Jayapataka Swami was being particularly heavy because there were some unsavory things coming out about the Mayapur community while I was there. And Jayapataka Swami was giving class. And he was saying, people should be married. He was saying a very strong statement that if you are, experiencing challenges, then you should get married. And he was saying, because that's not sinful. It's not nearly as sinful to be married and to have a relationship with your wife or husband. But to have illicit sex is extraordinarily sinful. But he also said, he made sure to chime in, but if you are having sex outside the purpose of producing children in the married ashram, then that's not pure devotional service. And you're disqualifying yourself from the acts of pure devotional service or Shuddha Bhakti, which is what we really want. We want to have Shuddha Bhakti. But by all means, better to be married than to engage in illicit sex, which degrades the entire population. Jesus Christ said that the worst of all sins is illicit sex. Why? Because illicit sex doesn't just affect you and the person, it affects the whole population. And Arjuna goes on to describe that also in the Bhagavad Gita, that the whole population is affected because of degraded progeny. And we see that in the world today, that there's no families anymore. And when there's no families, actually a society is made up of individuals. It's also made up of families. A country is made up of families. And so when the family is destroyed, which was the demon's goal, when the family unit is destroyed, then the whole society pretty much falls apart. Because people aren't able to be raised in a safe environment. They're very much disturbed, constantly disturbed, because it's unwanted population. And the type of soul that incarnates is not necessarily good. You get some pretty heavy, bad souls that incarnate after a night of fireballs, and fireball's a type of liquor. And, And some girl gets pregnant, and it's like, uh-oh, I'm pregnant. Then I have to have a son, but the son is, he was a demon floating around a bar, and then he saw, mommy and daddy were getting kind of drunk, and then, he decided I was going to go down and join the party, and the next thing you know, you have some demon spawn, and now you're stuck with the demon spawn for 18 years. Sorry, it sounds kind of mean, but that's the truth. So difference is when you have two pure devotees chanting 50 rounds, coming together to have a child, and then in that case, they're attracting a child who's aspiring, or a soul that's aspiring to go back home, back to Godhead, and take birth in a devotee family. And still then, it's even difficult. It said that a man in Kali Yuga who can keep his family together, he's considered expert. Because it's very, very difficult for the Grihastha ashram in the Kali Yuga. Why? Because there's so much complication. It's actually, in the previous days, you had, you built your cottage, your house, and you had your farm. And, husband and wife had children. They raised their children, and they worked on the farm. And that was life. Very simple. And they practiced Krishna consciousness. This is a very simple, wonderful life. You're taking this human form of life, you're dealing with it in the time you're here, and you're going back home, back to Godhead. Whereas now, you have a child, and all this paperwork. You have to get them vaccinated, or then you say, I don't want to get them vaccinated. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on, and then you have to put them through school. And you have to pay fines, and you have to buy them all these clothes. There's so much that goes on, and it's entirely more complicated process than just having a child and raising that child. And that's Kali Yuga. You make everything very complicated. So if one is capable of raising a pure devotee child, then that child will help deliver the father and mother from the nescience of material life. And there's some beautiful stories in regards to that in our own movement. One of them is His Holiness Bhadrinarayan Swami Maharaj, who tells the story about his father who never ever supported his devotional service. He was always antagonistic toward the fact that Bhadrinarayan Swami was a devotee. And so he tells that, his father was about to die and went into a coma. And he was in this coma. And Bhadrinarayan Swami Maharaj was the only one there as his father was leaving his body. The other members of the family were coming. And it said that the father came out of a coma and said, Hare Krishna, and then died. So in that way, Sri Krishna somehow gave him some memory to remember Krishna and leave his body. And another beautiful story is that His Holiness Indrajumna Swami Maharaj, whose mother was not actually interested in Krishna consciousness. She was agnostic. She was very, I'm not so interested. And she appreciated, it's what you do. But Indrajumna Swami describes in one of his books how he was preaching in, Eastern Europe, and he got a call from his mother in the middle of the night. And she said, son, I want you to take me to Vrindavan. And he's thinking, what? Mom's calling me randomly and says, I want to go to Vrindavan. That's like, what's going on here? And he says, Mom, I'll call you tomorrow. It's late here, it's across the world. She's in the US. So they hang up, and he, wakes up the next morning. He calls his mother, and his brother answers, and he says, I got a call from Mom last night that she wanted to go to Vrindavan. And the brother said, actually, your mom passed away last night. She had cancer for months, but she didn't want to tell you and disturb you. But before she died, when she found out she had cancer, she had me go to the attic and get down all the books you'd given her over the years. And she started reading the books. And she called your tape ministry, and she was listening to your classes constantly. And her last words were, I know where I'm going to where Krishna is, and so I'm not scared. So in that way, Krishna also delivered the mother of, the great devotee Indradyumna Swami because of the service that child has done. So you see that a great child, when the son becomes a devotee, delivers the parents. And even the guru sometimes. The great disciple could help deliver the guru, it's described. So that kind of gives us impetus that we should all aspire to be good devotees and practice very nicely. And the purpose of accepting a wife in religious marriage as sanctioned in the Vedas is to have a putra, or a qualified son, to deliver his father from the darkest region of hellish life. Marriage is not intended for sense gratification. So like I was explaining, each ashram, unless one's a Paramahamsa, that's at that stage, you're out of this, it doesn't make a difference anymore. But each ashram is dealing with the same challenge, which is perverted reflection of love of Godhead, lust. And so the brahmacharis are dealing with it one way, the grihastas are dealing with it another way. But in any case, there's no sense gratification. So, an easy thought for me is that actually when you take initiation, you've already taken a vow of celibacy. If you actually honestly look at that, it means that, I've taken a vow to have no illicit sex, and Prabhupada clearly defines illicit sex as sex life outside the purpose of having children. So initiation means I've already taken a vow of celibacy. So whether I'm brahmachari or grihasta, still there's celibacy. In one case, I'm having children in the Nivas, and in the other case, I'm brahmachari, I'm serving Krishna full time. But in both cases, I'm dealing with the perverted reflection of Krishna's love in the form of lust, and gradually working through it so that I can become a pure devotee and go back home, back to Godhead. And Krishna is giving us service. In any case, we need responsibility. You can't avoid responsibility in life. Grihastas have so much responsibility. One of the reasons now that, there's no men in the world, and I'm serious when I say that, men are a dying breed, real men, because, they just use a contraceptive and there's no consequence. So they have the same desire to go out and meet women and do the whole thing, but they don't have children. And children give an impetus for a man to actually, mature and have a job, and, actually has to do some service in his life. Even if he's not a devotee at all, he still has responsibility. And responsibility forces us to become responsible. So, nowadays there's no responsibility. And because the illicit sex is so bad, with the pornography and so many things, all the vital energy is gone. And so men are very weak and they don't want to take responsibility. And a brahmachari, you can't just expect to live at the temple and not take some form of responsibility, because then you will be unhappy for sure. You have to take up leadership. You have to take responsibility for others, helping others. You have to do your service nicely. You have a responsibility to the entire civilization as a preacher of Krishna consciousness, as a servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. And therefore, you also have to take responsibility. So, what do you call someone who's not a brahmachari and not a grihasta? They're a brahmashtra. So we don't want to be a brahmashtra. Because this responsibility is a service to God, and it helps us to elevate ourselves. So the service of the grihasta is to what? They're supporting the sannyasis and brahmacharis. They're supporting the Krishna consciousness movement by having nice Krishna conscious children. They're also preaching. They're opening their homes. They're raising Krishna conscious families. They have a varna, which is in real Krishna conscious society, Vedic varnashram or Daivi varnashram. Their varna is supporting the society by either a kshatriya, defending and protecting and ruling, or Vaishya, growing food and doing mercantile things, or a brahmana preaching, teaching. In any case, they're contributing to society, and in their personal lives, they're practicing Krishna consciousness. So they're, in that way, dealing with and uplifting society by contributing something via responsibility. And the brahmacharis, they're always responsible with so many things at the temple. We can't just be, lazy bachelors. That's not our position. And that's not devotional service. Devotional service means service. And we have a responsibility to keep ourselves very sharp. We're living in the temple so that we can preach to others, and we can give them bhakti, and we can guide others. So you see that in any case, whether one is having a son or whether one is a brahmachari, one is having to take up some responsibility in life. And therefore, if that responsibility is done under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, then one will make progress in spiritual life. One will make rapid advancement by that responsibility, by doing one's duty. That's considered an extremely high dharma. When Lord Chaitanya asks Ramananda Roy, what's the highest dharma? Ramananda says, perform your duty. That's the highest dharma. Lord Chaitanya, of course, rejects that and goes to a higher dharma, but that's considered a very high dharma, just to do one's duty. But one's duty has to be, actually holy. It can't be like my duty to slaughter animals and sell alcohol and sell drugs. That's not a duty. But so we don't have, in this age, it's not practical to practice just the duty-bound yoga, karma yoga, because all of our duties are innately sinful, especially in America. You can't work at a grocery store without selling tons of meat and alcohol. So you have to be aware of that. And it's the working under the direction of the devotee. That's what makes it bhakti. And so when one does like that and performs their prescribed duties, then one can make rapid advancement very nicely. So, yeah, that's about all I have to say. We can have some discussion. I hope we can have some discussion because the offering's still there. Take a second. Chandrika.
You were talking about being responsible. So to be irresponsible, is that more in the mode of passion and ignorance? So if one gets more into more of a sattvic way, they'll become more clear-minded and more connected with Krishna and to therefore be more responsible. Is that the general?
Yeah, definitely. The mode of passion makes us irresponsible. If you think, what is responsibility? It's our ability to respond. And so, how is it that a person in the mode of goodness responds to things? Because he can see things as they are, it's described. Person in the mode of goodness sees things as they are, whereas person in the mode of passion can't see things as they are because he's fixed on a result. He has a desire. And therefore we see that, people in the mode of passion do irresponsible things. And in the mode of ignorance, they do even more irresponsible things. So when one has some responsibilities, one has to become responsible, or else they have a really bad time in life. So if someone has a child, how many times do you hear, like, I think you've told me this before, like, some girls really, she's doing lots of drugs, she's doing all kinds of low-dimensional things, and then she ends up, getting pregnant, and then all of a sudden she stops and gets very serious about life because now there's another life involved. So one then takes up some responsibility because they're forced to. So in the same way, we also have to realize the gravity of what's going on in the material world and take up that responsibility, become intelligent, come to the mode of goodness, and stop doing those things that are, like it says, what is it? Purusha prakriti stohi bhakte prakriti jangunam karnam gunasango syad sarasad yoni janmashu. that the living entity, the Purusha Prakriti story, the living entity situated in Prakriti, in the material world, Bhakte Prakriti Jangunan, he's enjoying different things, different enjoyments born of the modes of material nature. Bhakte Prakriti Jangunan, born of the gunas. Karanam guna sangosyat. Why? Karanam, because guna sangosyat. He's associating with those gunas. Therefore, sadasad yoni janmashu, he's taking birth in various demoniac and good living entities. So what are we associating with? Are we associated with the mode of passion? Are we associated with the mode of goodness? So if someone has a responsibility, then now it might not be advantageous for me to associate with, drugs and alcohol or those things in the mode of ignorance anymore, because I have some responsibility. And we see that, like, I'd like to stay up all night late every night, but I go to bed early because I have a responsibility to the deities. So the deities have made me a lot more responsible because now I have all this deity service. So I have to go to bed earlier. I have to be much more strict on myself. So Krishna has set it up in such a way that, people are actually forced to elevate themselves if we follow. Lolita?
So you're talking about, unwanted progeny and how they kind of wreak havoc on the society at large. And this was actually scientifically proven. Like some years ago, there's a book that came out called Freakonomics, and I know I brought this up before, but it was also a movie. I don't know if any of you read the book or saw the movie, but it was about non-traditional economic problems and correlations and things like that. And what they found was that there was like a dramatic drop in crime in the 70s and the early 80s, and that correlated with the passing of abortion, making abortion legal. I'm in no way advocating abortion, but how that correlated is that the majority of serious crime offenders are young men in their late teens, early 20s, early 30s, and so those men would have been that age in the 70s and the early 80s. The men that were never born because they were aborted. And so that scientifically proves that, the lack of these unwanted progeny actually caused society to have less crime. However, many people that will say, abortion is a good thing, will use that as an example why abortion is a good thing. And so maybe you could explain a little bit about why that would not be a good thing.
Let's kind of just, throw the baby out with the bathwater, It's kind of like, well, in order to stop murders, let's murder. That's the thinking. Let's murder children, innocent children, rather than, God forbid they become, demons. We'll just kill them.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't fix the problem without Krishna consciousness. The real contraceptive method is becoming a devotee, becoming Krishna conscious. Then it becomes very, even if if you're not going to be a brahmachari, still it's like, you see, nice devotee couples, they're having children. It's nice, that's okay. And they're not, but there is a sense of control. There's a sense of responsibility. And, we have to regain that momentum. I mean, what you said, that's just ultimately sinful. And there's reactions for that. It's going to come down on us. It's coming down on us, So they didn't do anything, but it's innately, where I was going with that. Anyhow, we have to, be Krishna conscious. We have to reestablish the sanctity of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That, marriage is a serious thing. You take marriage, that means, okay, I'm married to this person. I have responsibility to this person. I'm ready, willing, and able to do what is necessary to work with this person as a holy thing, as a vow to God. You're coming in front of the deities and the altar, and you're doing the whole thing. And in that way, of course, minus, obviously, if there's serious abuse, these types of situations, But when it's just, you're not attractive anymore, which is generally what it is, or you're not, this isn't giving me juice anymore. You have to realize this is a responsibility, and therefore keep the family together. We were in Dallas, and Hriyananda Maharaj was giving class, and he was saying, the spiritual world, there's relationships. It's not that just everybody's, just focused on Krishna and there's no relationships with each other. He said, you think that Mother Yashoda and Nanda don't love each other? He said, no, we're just together for the sake of the children. He says, that's generally what people say when the relationship is going south. So, we have to love each other. We have to really take responsibility. And that responsibility comes from serious God consciousness. I mean, at least for me, like a vow is a huge thing. I've taken a vow. At initiation, I took a vow. And what a vow means is no is no longer an option. That's what it means, is at that point, the option of breaking that vow is gone. Like Bhishma Dev. The Kshatriya is supposed to be if a woman approaches a Kshatriya for sex, then the Kshatriya is supposed to say yes, but he had made a vow to be celibate. And so he said no. And then she said, well, I'm going to tell your guru. And he says, the guru said, well, you have to marry this woman or else I'm going to fight you. And his guru is Parshuram, God himself, the greatest warrior. And Bhishma Dev says, fine, I'll fight you, but I'm not going to break my vow. And so we have that consciousness, like nothing will make me break my vow. That's our understanding. Is I've taken a vow to follow 4 regulative principles and chant 16 rounds. That's it, boss. There's no options anymore. Otherwise, don't take the vow. It's not a vow then. And so that's what a vow means. And so when you take a vow of marriage, that means that, what is it, for better or worse, through thick and thin, I'm going to, try to serve you. But, if we've devalued what a promise means so much in society, we have to seriously give people a lot of moral fiber. That comes by association. All right, it's breakfast time. Hari Bol, Nita Gaur Premanande, Jai Jai Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you for Hare Krishna.